Next up, we have Adam Franchino, Mountmaker from the Walters Art Museum in Baltimore, and he'll be speaking on Wings and a Prayer, Building the Mount for Archangel Michael.
Hello, I'm Adam Franchino, and I am the art handler and mount maker at the Walters Art Museum. The project I made a presentation for today is on Wings and a Prayer, Building the Mount for the Archangel Michael. The Walters Art Museum acknowledges the Piscataway and Susquehannock nations that originally inhabited the land on which this museum is located. We also acknowledge tribal nations, most notably the Lumbee, that migrated here, and indigenous peoples whose ancestors are represented in the objects that we steward in our collection. And this is the object. This is the Archangel Michael. It is a 17th century ivory sculpture carved in the Philippines. The piece stands 49 inches or 124 centimeters tall. It's constructed from over 14 pieces of elephant ivory, and the ivory Saint Michael and the demon sit atop a carved marble base that, from the style, we believe was made at a later date by a European artist. And the piece was originally assembled as a stack. The ivory demon is placed on top of the marble base and is fixed into place with 2 iron rods. These iron rods then pass up and go through holes in St. Michael's feet up and into his legs to support him. In 2021, we returned St. Michael to display after decades of being in storage. The new display required a mount for him to be, The main purpose of this mount was the large ivory wings that were originally held in mortises on St. Michael's back could no longer support the wings. So the mount would have to hold the wings in their original position. There is movement in the joint between St. Michael's feet and the demon on those iron dowels, and that movement would have to be stabilized for display. And the new display would show St. Michael in the round, meaning the challenge with this mount would be to hold these wings up in place 3 feet off the deck while being inconspicuous at the same time. So this is the solution we ended up coming up with. The plan for the new mount was to take advantage of the considerable weight. St. Michael on the marble base. The marble base itself is very heavy, and the ivory sculpture, which is about the size of an infant, is surprisingly heavy. So using this weight to counterweight the wings, we would build the mount with a brass plate that would slide under the sculpture, and the mount plate holding it down under the sculpture would help the wings be supported, and this would allow us to use a tight-fitting contour mount, which would look best visually with what we had to work with. And this mount would be built in 4 parts: the footprint, the tower, the wing mounts, and the bracing arm. Oh, sorry, and I was also gonna, so the tower I was gonna build in stages. So as the tower began, I would start it as wide as possible or around the marble base, and it would slowly get narrower towards the attachment point for the wing mounts at the top of St. Michael's back. Building this mount required access to the back of St. Michael, and while he was assembled on the demon and the base. To stage the object, I put together this custom cart. We had this red metal mount that we actually believe was used for him at some point in the museum's history. and I attached it to the cart so that we could support St. Michael from the front, giving me access to the back. And I put another layer of wood on, so when the time came to test the new mount, we could simply slide the old mount away and have the new mount take over. Construction began with the footprint of the mount. This was made with a 1/4-inch piece of Sintra, which came from an old label that we had laying around the shop. So I cut this to the shape of the marble base, and then in the back of the footprint, I routed out an 1/8-inch mortise for a brass plate to fit in. And this brass plate would serve as the base of the main tower of the mount. And also using this footprint allows the tower to slide in and out under the sculpture while the base is on this footprint. This is the first stage of the tower. Once St. Michael was staged on the footprint, we started work on the tower. I added 2 rods at a wide stance on either side of the base. And the top of the marble base behind the demon was actually relatively flat. Here I installed a flat plate on the rods, providing a base camp or a stable surface for the next stage of the climbing mount. From the solid foundation of the first stage, 2 short rods were added going directly to St. Michael's heels. These heel plates stabilized the movement in the joint. The heel plates also served as a visual indicator of where St. Michael should be when installing him on the mount. The iron rods that go in his legs still allow his feet to pivot a little bit, so having the heel plates shaped to his feet allows us to see and make sure that he's in the right place for the mount to fit. And then from the back of the heel plates, I continued the contour mount up the back of St. Michael's legs. This is the third stage of the mount that goes from the bottom of St. Michael's armor up to the up to the top of his back. For this stage, I went to flat brass bar and abandoned the metal rod. We were nearing where we had to be for the mount, and we didn't need as much strength at the top of the mount as we did at the base. And the flat rod actually blends into the terrages of St. Michael's armor down in the skirt area. And this also is hard to see right here, but in the hip mount, in the horizontal bar at the hip, I inserted a piece of square tube that would hold the bracing arm to keep St. Michael close to pull St. Michael in close to the mount and stop him from moving forward. Once I completed and shaped the stage of the mount that was going up St. Michael's back, I had to attach it to the portion at the top of his legs. So to do this, I added 2 rods to the bottom of the mount, to the bottom of the third stage, and bent them directly to meet the top of the rods at the top of the second stage of the tower. And this is the completed tower. And when they're all together, this stack of 3 rectangles makes it very difficult to adjust. So it was very important to have every stage shaped correctly, because when they're together, they are 3 connected rectangles, and trying to adjust one corner of one always distorts something else somewhere down the line. And then I was able to move on to the wing mounts and the attachment point. The wings had individual mounts made that completely supported them when attached to the tower of the mount. The attachment point for the wing mounts, I brazed threaded rod into the attachment point with a registration pin under it. I chose to use threaded rod instead of tapping the tower and putting a screw in there, mostly so I could sleep at night. I felt a lot more secure with a fastened threaded rod holding the wings, and not having a screw slowly wiggle itself loose. And it was also possible to see if the nut is moving at all just by looking at it from the outside. Then to attach the individual wing mounts to the attachment plate, I had to put in some extension plates. This was actually trickier than I initially thought because of the angle of the wings. The length of the extension plate and the angle that it met the wing mount was really important. The ivory tabs on the edge of the wings had to be in the original mortises, but supported by the mount. So you can see in the middle picture here, it's polished clean instead of primer because I had to redo that joint a couple times. But once we got it right, the wings sat in the mortises as intended. The painting of the mount actually went surprisingly smooth. The shape of the mount against St. Michael's armor blended in really well, and the design existing on the piece is very visually distracting and kind of allowed the mount just to blend away once it was painted. And here is St. Michael going on display. The footprint and the counterweight design was actually helpful for install. We could position just the piece of Sintra footprint where we wanted it in the case without having to slide around the marble base as a starting point, and it does not need to be fastened into the case because of the weight. Then in the first picture here, you can see me sliding the tower in under the footprint. So the mount install went very smoothly. The trickiest part was actually getting the large vitrine up over St. Michael's sword. And to do this, we used a lift and strapped the vitrine to the lift and slowly moved it over St. Michael and down into position. And this is St. Michael on display. This is actually the best picture I have of the bracing arm as it's being used. I didn't document it well, but you can see under St. Michael's sword arm at the crease of his armor is a small rod, and that pulls his body against the mount, making sure that nothing moves. And that's the end. That's the mount.
Thank you, Adam. I'm in the back here with the virtual questions. The base plate for that mount, is it secured to the deck?
It is not secured to the deck. The mount was not, the object's so heavy that we weren't worried about it traveling. The mount was mainly to help to support the wings.
So when you have the stack, does someone else, someone hold the mount and then another person sort of scooch it in?
Yes,
and then you put the wings on.
Yeah. So in that picture, Mike there was tipping the sculpture forward so I could slide the piece into place, and it's just going into that mortise in the footprint. It slides very smoothly.
Excellent. Thank you. You can elaborate. You don't have to, though. Okay. It's okay. No pressure.
Does the piece of Sintra stay underneath the marble?
Yes, it is underneath the marble, and I painted the edge of it to blend in with the marble.
Okay. The painting is beautiful. It's really well done. Good
Thank
job.
you. It's actually the part of mount making I'm least comfortable with, but this piece actually, the painting went very quickly, and pretty happy with it. That's tricky. So I started designing it in February 2021, and it was installed in July, and this was always kind of a project that I would work on when I had free time. I'd probably say it's like 2 solid weeks if everything was put together.
So I think I understood it as that the points where the wings are attached, that those parts of the mounts, they can actually be deinstalled essentially on their own, so that the mount is like the center pillar is on there, and then you can bring in the wings in order to get them to fit into those mortises.
Yeah. So to install the wings, I first put the wing in the cradle and fed the tab into the mortise, and then the threaded rod went over. Sorry, then the plate was mounted to the threaded rod on the wing. But I had to install the mount and the wing kind of together because they kind of capture each other. So.
Gotcha.
And just roughly what gauge thickness would be the brass stems at the base?
The brass rods at the base. They might be 1/4 inch or around that. I don't think I remember exactly.
Can you talk a little bit about your brazing technique? It seems like it's always hard to get enough heat on heavy brass.
Yeah. Let's see. So, like when I was going into plates, I would always, drill a hole through the plate to insert the rod in to get a good joint. The brass here isn't especially thick, luckily, and I'd say like the trickiest part was just making sure the brazing angle was correct in a lot of these joints, especially under his armor where the second stage met the third stage. But I think with the oxyacetylene torch I have, I just made sure I used a bigger tip. And if I was going from a bigger piece to a smaller piece, keeping the heat on the bigger piece. So it wasn't anything too challenging, luckily.
I know you mentioned that you had a good time painting the mount, and I was curious to know what was your method of capturing the pattern, so that way when you painted it, it was.
So the pattern on his armor, I covered the back of him in cling wrap, and with pencil, I lightly drew patterns that would connect, or like the pattern that was directly under it, I could put the mount directly up to his back. And then to start the painting, I initially just painted the whole thing with acrylic unbleached titanium color. And then there's the only colors that I really used were gold for the gilding, and then like a burnt sienna. And then after everything was painted, to make it blend in more to the worn ivory look, I just kind of rubbed some burnt sienna up and down, and that helped knock away the brightness.
We have a virtual question, Adam. For long-term storage of the item, is the statue stored with the wings intact?
No, if we were to store it, we would store it in pieces.
The wings also seemed large. Are they also ivory?
Yes, the wings are all ivory. And actually the back of the wings is very interesting because it is the only part of the sculpture that's unfinished. So you can see that they are 3 sheets of ivory, and they have ivory cross members that that join the 3 sheets. So you can kind of see that in the image there.
So I had a question. I had a question about the mount. So as you built the 3 stages up to the wings, did you braze each of those stages together, or does the mount come out into components for travel?
So the whole tower is one piece. I did braze every piece of the tower together, but the wing mounts are fastened with nuts. So
the main part of the mount, do you use that for storage also, or do you disassemble the sculpture?
The sculpture is easy enough to disassemble. So we would take, besides the wings, it would just be St. Michael, the demon, the marble base, and then the 2 metal rods, and we would store them separately.
All right, thank you.
Is there any question about using Sintra underneath the piece and leaving it under it while it's on display inside a case in a closed environment?
There is a barrier between the Sintra and the marble, and I don't know like the Audi test results of Sintra. I believe they were good, but I don't know.
Hi there. Was there a barrier between the brass mount and the ivory surface?
Yeah, the whole mount is padded with suede polyethylene. Thank you.